Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you watching us from all over the world. I thank you for coming back and joining our summit, even though we are aware of very difficult times we are going through. Many are going through a much worse time than others. Welcome back to the second day of the fifth SIA Summit in Zug. We continue with the discussion with few of my friends and honored colleagues on the topic of planet, humanity, and finance. And just for information of few of the people who have registered for the free ticket, I think you can upgrade till 1 o'clock Swiss time today. So that means 2 more hours. I start with someone whom I know and I respect since very many years. He's very well known here in Europe in the sector of impact investment. He not only talks about it, but also has put his money what he speaks about. So I'm going to introduce you to Stephen Brenninkmeijer. For those who don't know him, he's a private investor with interest in climate change, impact investment, and education. For 30 years, he has been involved in family-held retail business, CNA in US, Japan, England, and of course, throughout Europe. He has been active in strategic investment since 2002 and founded Willows Investment in 2008 with the aim of supporting promising ventures with social mission. He holds many board positions, and he's also chair of the supervisory board of the European Climate Foundation, chair of the Business and Law Advisory Board of St. Mary's University in UK, and he's also member of board of directors of the World Resource Institute. Stephen, he, just like us, I am in the board of Climate Leadership Coalition, and he's in fact leading the supervisory board of the European Climate Foundation. So we both share the same views and fears of the future. Mm-hmm. And as part to answer that, what you wanted to say a few words on the topic of climate emergency and its relation to impact investment. So here, ladies and gentlemen, I hand you Stephen Brenninkmeijer.
Thank you, Ben, for having me this morning or this afternoon, depends on where you are. And I'm in England, and we still it's here before midday, so we can still call it morning. And I would like to touch this morning on the areas of climate emergency in relation to impact investment. Climate change is a global emergency. The impact of human activity on greenhouse gas emissions and land use have compounded environmental harm and created an escalating crisis. The devastation to our planet and to humanity will be immense if we don't move urgently to limit the damage. The drastic reduction in greenhouse emissions is needed if we are to stand a chance of staying below 1.5 degrees of warming relative to pre-industrial levels and prevent a major climate instabilities. The scale of the problem calls for a transformation of our systems and markets and the creation of a net zero society. And in this piece, I think impact investment has a very, very powerful role to play. What are the reasons for this climate emergency? It starts with us, human activity. Emissions caused by human activity, by our behavior, have caused almost 100% of global warming observed since 1950. And it's not only governments, it's not only corporates, it's not only communities, it's everyone around the planet, individual behavior, which drives this. How we consume, how we travel, how we communicate, etc. Later, a little bit more. Deforestation. Tropical forests now emit more carbon than they are able to absorb from the atmosphere as a result of deforestation and land degradation. And we know that some political players like Bolsonaro in Brazil, like the government of Congo or Indonesia, are not very actively engaged because this is where basically the biggest problems of deforestation takes place. But also in the Western world, we see deforestation. And we know that a lot of NGOs and areas and organizations are actively involved in fighting those battles. Rising CO2 levels could push hundreds of millions into malnutrition by 2050. And obviously rising CO2 levels have to do with global warming and the way that we are polluting the world. And we later talk about agriculture as well. But I think that is a real danger, what we're seeing here. Biodiversity. The combined effects of global warming and land use change could cause the world's ecosystems to lose more than a third of their animal species by 2070. And the big biodiversity conference in China was now postponed to next year. But obviously that's a crucial way of debating with each other what can and needs to be done in regards to preserve biodiversity. Farming and land use. The world's soils have released a damaging 133 billion tons of carbon since the dawn of agriculture. We know that agriculture has a big role to play. Over 30% of the CO2 emissions come from agriculture, not from traditional farming, but from industrialized farming. And this is the area there where we, the WRI, World Resources Institute, but also the European Climate Foundation, are very concerned about, and we have many programs and projects in place to work in this space. Sea level rise and ice. The rate of sea level rise resulting from the melting of the Antarctic ice sheet has tripled over the past 5 years. I've been in Greenland last year in August with a group of scientists and friends and colleagues. And traveling to Greenland, seeing with your own eyes what's happening there is just amazing. It's mind-blowing. And I can only recommend to make a journey up to Greenland and see for yourself. But we were accompanied by scientists who actually gave us the explanation of what has happened in the last 30 years in that part of the world. Health. Nearly 1 billion people could face the first exposure to a host of mosquito-borne diseases by 2080 under extreme global warming. So here we talk about mosquitoes by 2080. But obviously we are now currently living through a pandemic, COVID-19, which started actually last year and which actually is a global pandemic. And we are very much concerned about the link between human health and the environmental health. We see that the environment is very resilient. If it comes to this type of situation, the human health is very fragile. And particular in parts of the world where pollution levels are very high, we see that the people in the lowest class of income and social standing are the most vulnerable in that type of pandemic. And so we understand that this is the case. We've seen through the lockdown around the world that we suddenly could breathe fresh air. We could hear the birds sing. We could see the stars again. And I think that is a behavior or recognition that actually things can change. And the environment has changed very fast. But we now see as well, again, in China, where the economy is coming back strongly, that actually the pollution levels are going up again, like they were before nearly. The other point is water. Global warming and land use change will drastically reduce the availability of groundwater. On the one hand, we see that sea levels are rising because of the melting of the ice caps. But on the other hand, on land, groundwater is dropping, it's disappearing because of global warming. And you often hear the term that people say the next wars will be fought about water, not about oil. And then we talk about food in the oceans. The warming of the world's oceans has caused the total amount of fish that can be caught sustainably to fall by an average of 4% globally since 1930s. So we know that this is another big problem that we are facing. Coal, the consumption of coal has caused around 30% of the increase in the Earth's temperatures since the late 1800s. We at the European Climate Foundation, we have a very strong, powerful plan. We want to phase out coal across Europe by 2030. And we are well on our way. 2 countries stand out. One is Germany. And Germany has said they want to phase out coal by 2038, which we think is too late. They should actually focus on 2028. And Poland is the other country where 80% of the energy still comes from coal. And obviously a large part of the Polish society is still working in that industry. And we're working very closely with the Catholic Church, with communities across Poland to change the behavior and the mindset in regards of the population so that they understand that the renewable energy is actually the way forward. And then we talk about extreme weather. We've seen the hurricanes getting stronger. We've seen the fires getting hotter. 68% of all extreme weather events studied to date were made more likely or more severe by human-caused climate change. We talked about the melting of the ice, and which is a massive issue. Addressing the climate crisis is a great opportunity for bold change towards a fairer, healthier, and more sustainable society. The need for an urgent overhaul of our economy and way of life is setting into motion a global response to our biggest societal challenges. Creating long-term solutions to climate change requires the buy-in and participation of everybody in society. As I said before, it's not only governments, it's not only corporates, but it's all of us. We all have to change and understand what responsibility we have. Cleaner and more efficient communities will raise the quality of life for all citizens. Greater access to clean energy will fuel new jobs and create a dynamic new economy. And that is, I think, for me, the link into impact investment. The benefits of a net zero society can serve not only to avert disaster, but to create more peace and prosperity. So when we talk about impact investment, impact is the measure of an action's benefit to society and the planet. So it has a very strong link, society and the planet. We must shift it to the center of our consciousness. When we weigh business and investment decisions, we must adopt a new paradigm of risk, return, and impact. So that has to go hand in hand. It is possible to do well and to do good at the same time. So businesses should create their purpose. Why are they here for? And how can they become a force for good as a business? Impact can be measured and compared. And we must come together to adopt a pay-for-success impact model. Let's also shift to measuring outcomes, not only activities. Impact entrepreneurs are powerful allies, and we should support their efforts globally. Let's act now. There's never been a greater need for a better time. And we see, when we see the strategic plan of BP, which just has been published, BP talks about becoming an energy company and not a fossil fuel company. And they talk about massive investments into renewable energy. And I would class this as the new normal for impact investment. I think this is what we really have to accept and work on. And I think other companies will follow, like Shell and like Total. But we see in the main that in the US, companies are much, much slower. If you look at what Exxon does, I think this is a disaster. And I think the shareholders should wake up, and the board of Exxon should wake up and see that they actually move in the right direction. And we think that probably 40% of the current fossil fuel companies and oil companies will not exist in 10 years. Impact is the measure of an action's benefit to society and the planet, as we said before. We must shift it into the center of our consciousness. But we have to ask ourselves the question, what kind of world do we want to live in? That's the question confronting us all today: consumers, pensioners, philanthropists, investors, entrepreneurs, social sector organizations, and big company leaders. We saw the first wave of the tech revolution, which has come and gone. Our lives have been transformed, and yet nations are still racked by economic inequality, social strife, and environmental catastrophe. It's time for us to see the writing on the wall. Things cannot continue as they are. If we look at the sector of philanthropy, it's obviously helpful and does amazing work, but in the main does not offer scalable solutions yet. it can only do as much to assist governments as philanthropic donations are small relative to government expenditure. Less than 5% of government expenditure on health and education alone. Instead, we need to learn from the tech revolution, whose fruits were born from private capital. It is urgent that we access financial markets to harness entrepreneurship and innovation again, and that is the time that we steer them towards social change. And we are working strongly with pension funds, with insurance companies, with asset managers, with the big banks, under the guidance of Mark Carney and others, to make them aware what is their asset allocation like, and how much of their assets are increasing global warming or decreasing global warming. And I think that is a question that needs to be answered. Let's demand that our investment managers implement credible impact strategies. Let's push for responsible and sustainable investment allocations of 50% plus of portfolios and impact investment allocations of 10% plus. Leaders and employees of big businesses have to set measurable impact objectives alongside financial ones and report on performance in achieving them. As citizens, we all should urge our governments to encourage investors and businesses to make decisions based on risk-return impact and adopt common impact accounting and reporting standards. As voters, let's urge our governments to shed old ways of thinking and embrace the impact revolution and measure outcomes rather than inputs in their expenditure and procurement, and establish outcomes funds to address social and environmental issues at scale. As philanthropists, let's direct our foundation endowments to engage in impact investing and our grant programs to focus on outcomes, not activities. And as social sector leaders, let's integrate outcome measurement into our organizations. Now I bring you a quote of Pope Francis in his encyclical Laudato Si. And he talks about business as a noble vocation directed to producing wealth and improving our world. It can be a fruitful source of prosperity for the areas in which it operates, especially if it sees the creation of jobs as an essential part of its service to common good. So we have to look at not business as usual. The old normal is gone. We have to develop a new normal, which is the let's say the stronger focus on impact investing into the climate space. And the British government has announced that by 2030, they want 60% of all their energy come from renewable sources. If we look at the German situation, 42% of their energy comes from renewable sources. So we see there's amazing investment opportunities in that field. And for me, that is very much also the tool that impact investment has to play and has to work in. I would like to finish with another quote from Pope Francis, another quote from Pope Francis from Laudato Si. In the story of creation, God entrusted people to work and care and protect the land and the work. And business has to be caring for the earth. Technology can help, and innovation and also the financial sector can help. We have to be in service for a common home, as he calls it. And this has to be started now. And we will see the benefits in the next years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I mean, it's amazing. Every time you speak, I think we agree absolutely about all the points you mentioned. So what I would do, instead of making my questions, which will be unlimited, there are questions coming in from all over the world. One of the question is that, as you know, today many people are watching from the all over the world, and one of them is the university, the International Islamic University of Malaysia. And because it's being transmitted over the students and everything, the question is, as a seasoned investor, what would be your advice to the young students and often the future entrepreneurs to plan their future?
This is obviously a very big question. And I think for me, if you start out in that industry, I think gain experience, learn from others' experience, learn from mistakes which others have made, and basically go out and make your own mistakes and learn from your own mistakes. And I think there are ample opportunities to do this. When I started in impact investment in, let's say, 15 years ago, I made a lot of mistakes. And obviously, the key is that you that you should learn from your mistakes and try not to make the same mistake again. And that's not always possible. And so learn from the experience that is around. Find your strategic partners, find strong mentors who can help you, and ask a lot of questions, and but also be humble enough that you say you admit that you don't know it, and that you really have to gain more experience in order to move on.
Mhm. Thank you. And another question is, do you think that, because you mentioned also about the oil industry, like Exxon, and in my personal opinion, I think Exxon has already started feeling the pain of their, you must have read that they got pushed out of the Dow Industrial Index.
Yeah.
So they are feeling the pain of it. In 2013, they were one of the biggest companies, or maybe the biggest company in the world. And today they have been humiliated and pushed out of a very exclusive club where they have been a member of the last, I think for the last 92 years or something. The question was, do you still think the oil industry can still remain alive if it transits to a green strategy, or does it have to transform into an alternative energy supplier? What is the role of the government in incentivizing green energy?
I think we will need oil. So oil is a product which actually will be there actually for a very long time, because there's so many products that use oil as their component. But we should not use oil to just burn it, like refineries, etc., and petrol, etc. So I think that is the main thing, and I think that is the point that the people like BP and Shell and others feel that this business is actually changing. But I think oil itself has phenomenal ingredients, and so we will need it, but probably not in the way that we use it now. We feel that the next say 10, 15 years, the consumption of oil will probably drop down to 30% of what it is now. And then obviously other hydrogen and obviously renewable energy, solar and wind are very much taking over. And yes, governments should give incentives, and but we see actually that businesses are moving much faster than governments do, and so there's much more, let's say, progressive developments in businesses than in governments. If you look at a company like Unilever, I think they're outstanding in the way that they operate, in the way that they want to become a sustainable company. And I think that is a very, 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 very good example. But obviously, the countries they operate in, obviously they don't show that same sort of energy in regards of becoming net zero. And obviously, 196 countries signed the Paris Agreement, but okay, the execution of that is still a big doubt. To what extent are they really? And then obviously that is the other question with the Green New Deal, 750 billion euros, which has been committed. Obviously, the 27 members of the EU, not everybody is 100% behind that, and obviously that is the massive task for the EU to manage this.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I also have question marks about a lot of commitments have gone in, but how much of it will be implemented at the end, especially the deadlines and the years they have spoken. Another question somebody asked is, the humanity is not ready to sacrifice certain things to prioritize the planet and humanity. How can we progress then? There is no option other than collaborating.
That's true. I think the people who suffer the most from the human race are the people at the bottom end of the society. And I think that is what we have to really, let's say, understand and reflect on. And we see it during this pandemic very clearly, who's really suffering the most. And these are the people who, yeah, really at the bottom end of society, and people who are well off. They can work much better, and they can protect themselves better, and they have better medical facilities, etc. So I think there's a crucial situation in that respect, that we have to look out for the poor, as also again Pope Francis says very clearly. This is where it hurts the most, and we have to really make sure that we protect them and help them.
Yeah, and to make the situation worse, they are also the people with the least impact.
Yeah,
The people who are impacting the climate the least are
yeah,
suffering the most from it.
exactly. Yeah.
So, and also that was my personal question. How do you yourself feel in the upper echelon of the societies in the Western world, the awareness of it rising, that it can't go on as it is going on, especially with their individual carbon footprint, with their individual lifestyle, that it's having a far more. So, if the top of the societies convert or change, that will have a far greater impact than if the bottom line of the society will convert or change.
Yeah. No, I think what everybody has realized because of the lockdown, that individual behavior has changed, because people are not traveling anymore.
Yeah.
But they're as, or probably even more productive than they were before, because they don't have to travel. You know, it takes, for quite a few people, it probably takes a minute
Yeah.
to, this is your business travel, to a minute to be at your desk every day, and not sort of 2.5 hours like in many cases. And so people get used to that. But obviously it has also a downside, you know, that personal interaction is missing, and people need that social contact.
Mhm.
And we've done that within the European Climate Foundation in a way that we, like many organizations, we run these social events on a Friday, so where people can actually mingle through Zoom and other facilities, and sort of have some social time together. And I think that is just important. People need that. And
Mhm.
so I think the behavior, everybody now has understood that through these last 6 months, our lives have dramatically changed in the Western world, and I think not only there, but I think we probably want to keep a lot of that change going forward, and not go back to the old normal.
Yeah. And can you say a little bit about the activities of ECF, a little bit for the audience?
Now we are an important foundation within Europe, but not only Europe. So we actually have a global reach, but we are called the European Climate Foundation. So 80% of our work is really focused on Europe. I spoke earlier about coal. One of our big programs is to phase out coal across Europe by 2030. We supporting the EU with the Green New Deal, Franz Timmermans and his cabinet. We working with all governments around Europe on this, the execution of their climate policies. We are close advisors to Alok Sharma of the British government, who is the president of COP26. So we have all these roles to play. We're working on clean air, pollution levels in the big cities. We helped Sadiq Khan in London to create the low emission zone, which is very successful. We've been approached by many other cities around Europe to help them create similar, let's say, schemes. We're talking to industry, the steel industry, aluminum industry, cement industry, pharmaceutical industries, and all these industries, to help them and to understand with them how we can, let's say, create a net zero aspect of their business. We're working with the major oil companies, the BPs, the Shells, etc., and advising them. But we are re-granting organizations. We have about 300 people in our 300 organizations in our network who we are supporting and with whom we are working closely and creating projects together.
Okay. No, thank you very, very much. I just wanted to close with one last question. You talked a lot about what should happen on a big scale, but what can individuals do at this moment?
I think if you try to figure out what your carbon footprint is, which is obviously not that easy to do, and let's say you look at your consumption habits, you know, for instance, what we are likely to do very often. We buy string beans in your supermarkets, and you should look at the label. Where do these string beans come from? And most probably, when they come from Kenya, they've been flown in.
Yeah.
And so these little string beans, you got the nutrition information on the packet, and you got the price on the packet, but you don't have their carbon footprint on the packet. And so we are, let's say, promoting very much the idea of also putting carbon footprint on the packets of the produce that you buy in supermarkets. So how do we consume? How much red meat do we want to eat? You know, is it farmed, traditional farmed meat, or is it meat that is industrialized farmed meat? And same with chickens, same with fish. So how do we consume? Are we interested in really understanding where the produce comes from? And okay, if you say you don't want to buy string beans from Kenya, obviously those string beans also create a lot of employment opportunities in these markets. So if we say we don't want to buy them anymore, we then also have to come up with ideas how to keep people in employment in these emerging market economies. So it has to go hand in hand. So we can't just do one thing, but we have to do it, let's say, holistically, that we really help each other. So how do we travel? You know, and how often do we use a bicycle? How much do we walk? Do we have an electric car, or do we still drive around in an old dirty diesel?
Yeah.
You know, all these issues are important, so we can all make a difference there. And in your own home, do you still have halogen lamps, or do you have LED lamps, etc.?
Yeah.
So there are many areas that we can do, and but we should lead by example. And that's how we are working also with the Catholic Church to make sure that they're going to go carbon neutral by 2030, so that the parish priest, then when he uses renewable energy to power his church, can say on a Sunday, God, last week we used 85% of our energy came from heaven and not from hell.
That's amazing. Thank you so very, very much, Stephen. It's always a pleasure, and we can continue talking forever. So thank you very, very much for your time and for joining us. And with this, I say bye for now. But please feel free to stay on the line, because a lot of people from, I think, known to you are coming soon hereafter from all over the world speaking. So thank you, and bye for now, everybody.
Thank
We'll
you
be
so
back
much.
in about
Thank
10
you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye.